What if the darkness you are feeling right now is not the absence of God, but his overwhelming presence? There is a silence that screams. You know the feeling. You close your eyes to pray, just as you have done 1,000 times before. You reach out for the familiar hand of God, expecting the warmth, the comfort, the sense of peace that usually washes over you. But today, there is nothing. The heavens seem made of brass. Your prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling and fall flat on the floor. The sweet presence you relied on has evaporated, leaving behind a dry, dusty emptiness. Panic sets in. You search your heart. Have I sinned? Have I offended him? Why has he lifted his hand from me? You feel abandoned. You feel like a child lost in a vast, dark forest, calling out for a parent who refuses to answer. You think you are losing your faith, but listen closely. What if I told you that you are not losing your faith, but shedding your illusions? What if this terrifying silence is not a sign of God's anger, but the deepest form of his love? The great mystic St. John of the Cross called this experience the dark night of the soul. It is a phrase that sounds frightening, but it is actually a place of profound transformation. It is not a tomb where faith goes to die. It is a womb where a new, stronger, and purer faith is being knit together. In this video, we are going to walk through this night together. We are going to uncover the mystery of why God sometimes hides his face. We are going to discover that he is not an absent father, but a nursing mother who loves you too much to let you stay a spiritual infant forever. If you are tired of the silence, if you are hungry for a connection that goes deeper than feelings, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Hidden God Stories. Let us step into the cloud of unknowing.
Hidden God Stories, where God's mysteries are revealed.
To understand the darkness you are facing, we must first look back at the light you have lost. Do you remember the early days of your awakening? Or perhaps a specific season in your life where God felt so tangibly near that you could almost touch him? St. John of the Cross calls this the state of beginners. It is the honeymoon phase of the soul. In those days, faith felt effortless. It was sweet to the taste like honey. When you sat down to pray, tears of joy would come easily. When you opened the scriptures, the words seemed to leap off the page, speaking directly to your situation with electric clarity. You felt a burning zeal to serve, to give, to speak of God to anyone who would listen. You felt carried. You felt safe. It seemed as though the bridge between heaven and earth was short and easy to cross. You might have thought to yourself, finally, I have arrived. Finally, I know how to walk with God. In this season, St. John explains that God treats the soul exactly as a loving mother treats her tender infant. Picture this image in your mind, for it is the key to understanding your current pain. A mother warms her child at her own breast. She feeds him with sweet milk and soft food that requires no chewing. She carries him in her arms so that his delicate feet never have to touch the rough, hard ground. She anticipates his every need. If he whimpers, she is there instantly to soothe him. She caresses him, and the child lives in a world of total security and sensory pleasure. This is how God treats us when we are spiritual infants. He gives us the milk of spiritual consolation. He allows us to feel the high of his presence. He answers our prayers quickly, often before we have even finished asking. He protects us from the harsh realities of the spiritual battle. He does this to win us over, to attract us to the life of the Spirit, just as a mother uses sweet milk to nourish her child who is too weak to eat anything else. But there is a hidden danger in this sweetness. Because we are human and because we are still immature, we begin to misunderstand the nature of this relationship. We begin to fall in love with the milk rather than the mother. We begin to crave the spiritual high, the emotional release, and the sense of comfort, mistaking these feelings for God himself. We start to measure our spiritual health by how good we feel. If we cry during worship, we think we are holy. If we feel a shiver of awe, we think we are close to God. We become, in the words of the mystics, spiritual gluttons. We are like children who only greet their father when he comes home with pockets full of candy, but ignore him when his hands are empty. We seek the gifts of God, but not the God of gifts. We are selfish in our devotion, seeking our own satisfaction and calling it piety. We do not yet know how to love God for who he is. We only love him for how he makes us feel. And because God is a good father, and because he is a wise mother, he cannot leave us in this state. A mother who nurses her child forever is not loving. She is cruel. She is stunting the child's growth. If the child is ever to become an adult, if the child is ever to learn to walk on his own 2 feet, the nursing must stop. The soft embrace must be loosened. The sweet milk must be withdrawn. So the change happens. It often arrives suddenly, confusingly. One day, the spiritual sweetness just stops. The energy you used to have for prayer evaporates. You go to your quiet place and the silence is deafening. You try to read the Bible and it feels dry, like reading a legal textbook. You try to summon those old feelings of devotion, but your heart remains cold, heavy, and distracted. You feel a profound dryness in your soul. The God who seemed to be everywhere is suddenly nowhere to be found. You are bewildered. You look at your life and wonder, what did I do wrong? You assume that this dryness is a punishment. You assume that God is angry with you or that you have grieved the Holy Spirit. You try harder. You force yourself to pray longer. You hunt for new books, new sermons, new experiences, trying desperately to find that tap of sweet milk again. But the more you struggle, the deeper the darkness seems to grow. But here's the truth you need to hear right now. This dryness is not a sign of your failure. It is not a sign of God's absence. It is the sound of the mother setting the child down. The days of milk are over. The weaning has begun. Consider for a moment the sheer confusion of the child in this moment of weaning. For his entire short life, love has looked like one specific thing: being held, being fed, being warm. Love was synonymous with comfort. Love was synonymous with immediate gratification. So when the mother sets him down on the cold, hard floor, when she refuses to lift him up despite his cries, the child interprets this through the only lens he has. He thinks, she does not love me anymore. He thinks, I have been rejected. The child kicks his legs, he reaches out his hands, he screams until his face turns red. In his limited understanding, the withdrawal of the milk is an act of cruelty. He cannot comprehend that the mother is actually loving him more in this moment than when she was holding him. He cannot see that she is denying him a temporary pleasure to secure his long-term survival. If she kept him at her breast, his legs would never strengthen. His stomach would never learn to digest meat. He would grow into a man with the body of an infant, crippled by the very comfort he craves. This is exactly where you are right now spiritually. You are kicking and screaming against the silence. You are bargaining with God, promising to be better, to pray more, to fast longer. If only He will pick you up and give you that warm, fuzzy feeling of His presence again. You are interpreting the silence as rejection. You are interpreting the darkness as distance. But you are wrong. God has put you down. He has set your feet on the rough ground of faith. And He has done this not because He is finished with you, but because you are ready for the next stage of your evolution. He is teaching you to walk. When you were an infant in faith, you needed the constant reassurance of His presence. You needed the miracles, the signs, the emotional highs to convince you that He was real. But a faith that depends on constant reassurance is not faith at all. It is merely sight. It is merely sensory reaction. If you only trust God when you can feel Him, you do not trust Him. You trust your own nervous system. You trust your own emotions. And emotions are as shifting as the weather. So God withdraws the feeling of His presence to establish the reality of His presence in your soul. He removes the training wheels. He takes away the lights so that your pupils will dilate and learn to see in the dark. He wants you to learn to love Him when He offers you nothing but Himself. This is a painful transition. St. John of the Cross describes it as a time when the soul feels suspended between heaven and earth, finding comfort in neither. You cannot find pleasure in the things of the world anymore. The old distractions, the old sins, they taste like ashes in your mouth. But you also cannot find pleasure in God anymore. Prayer feels like labor and worship feels hollow. You are in the void. You are in the gap between the milk and the meat. It is in this gap that the most important work of your life is happening, though you cannot feel it. The mystics teach that during this dark night, God is actually communicating Himself to you in a new, secret way. He is no longer coming through the front door of your senses/emotions. He is coming through the back door of your spirit. He is bypassing your feelings to work directly on the substance of your soul. Think of it like a deep-sea diver. On the surface, the water is turbulent, noisy, and bright. But as the diver goes deeper, the light fades. The noise stops, the pressure builds. In the deep, it is dark and silent, but the water is denser. God is taking you deep. He is darkening your intellect and your emotions so that the light of pure faith can be ignited. The mother has not left the room. In fact, if you could see with spiritual eyes, you would see that she is standing closer to you now than ever before. Her hands are hovering just inches from your trembling body, ready to catch you if you fall, but disciplined enough not to interfere while you struggle to stand. She is watching you with a gaze of intense, proud concentration. She sees you trembling. She hears your cries. It breaks her heart to see you suffer, but her wisdom overrides her pity. She knows that if she picks you up now, you will never learn to walk. She knows that this struggle is the only way to turn your flabby, sentimental wishes into muscles of iron faith. You are not being punished. You are being promoted. You are not being abandoned. You are being reduced, stripped, and emptied so that you can finally be filled with something that will not spoil. You are being weaned from the milk of God's gifts so you can finally feast on the meat of God's will. So what is this solid food that the mother is preparing for you? What replaces the sweet milk of emotional consolation? The answer is simple, yet it is hard to swallow at first. The solid food is the naked will of God. It is the ability to obey, to trust, and to love without the sugarcoating of good feelings. St. John of the Cross warns us against a condition he calls spiritual gluttony. This happens when we pursue spiritual practices only because they taste good to us. We pray because it makes us feel holy. We serve because it makes us feel needed, but when the feelings vanish, our devotion vanishes with them. This reveals a painful truth. We were never really worshiping God. We were worshiping the mirror. We were worshiping the way God made us feel about ourselves. The dark night comes to smash that mirror. It comes to burn away the sugar addiction of the soul. God is teaching you a new way to love, a love that is selfless, robust, and mature. He is inviting you to love him when he is silent. He is asking, will you still follow me if I give you no goosebumps? Will you still trust me if I give you no signs? Will you still sit with me if I sit in silence? This is the transition from a transactional relationship to a transformational one. You begin to realize that the greatest gift God can give you is not a feeling of ecstasy, but a will that is aligned with his. You learn to find nutrition in the dry bread of simple obedience. You learn to say, Lord, I do not feel you, but I choose you. I do not see you, but I trust you. This choice made in the dark is more precious to God than 1,000 hallelujahs shouted in the light. The psalmist captured this beautiful state in Psalm 131. Surely I have behaved and quieted myself as a child that is weaned of his mother. My soul is even as a weaned child. Notice the progression. A nursing child is restless, demanding, and noisy until he gets what he wants. But a weaned child, a child who has grown up, can sit on his mother's lap in perfect peace, not demanding food, not screaming for attention, but content simply to be near her. He loves her for who she is, not just for what she gives. This is the destination of your darkness, the quiet, confident peace of the weaned child. But how do you navigate this night while you are still in the middle of it? How do you survive the silence without losing your mind? The most common mistake we make is to fight the darkness. We thrash around. We try to force the old feelings to return. We double our Bible reading. We shout louder in prayer. We run from church to church looking for a spark. But St. John advises the exact opposite. He counsels us to learn the art of quiet trust. When you are in a dark room, if you run around in panic, you will only stumble and hurt yourself. The only way to see is to stand perfectly still and let your eyes adjust to the dimness. You must stop trying to manufacture light. You must stop trying to feel your way to God. Instead, you must learn to rest in the naked faith, a faith that does not rely on the crutch of emotion. Practically, this means showing up. You continue to pray, but you change the way you pray. Instead of using many words or trying to stir up emotions, you simply sit in his presence. You say, Lord, I am here. I have nothing to offer you today but my poverty and my trust. I feel dry, but I offer you this dryness as an act of worship. You must believe that the work God is doing in you is happening below the threshold of your consciousness. Just as a surgeon puts a patient to sleep before performing a life-saving operation, God often puts our senses to sleep so he can work on our spirit without our interference. If you were awake to what he was doing, cutting away your pride, stitching up your wounds, you might struggle and ruin the work. So he works in the dark. He works in the silence. Your job now is not to achieve, but to receive. Your job is not to conquer, but to surrender. Trust that even in the silence, the nutrients of grace are flowing into you deeper than they ever have before. You are growing roots. You are becoming a tree that can withstand the drought, not a flower that wilts the moment the sun goes behind a cloud. So, if you are sitting in the darkness today, do not be afraid. Do not let the enemy whisper lies into your ear that you have been forgotten. You are not an orphan wandering in the wilderness. You are a beloved child sitting at the feet of a father who is teaching you the greatest lesson of all, how to trust him simply for who he is. This night will not last forever. That is a promise written in the very fabric of creation. The sun always rises. The winter always yields to spring. And this spiritual dryness will eventually give way to a rain of grace deeper and richer than anything you have experienced before. But until that dawn breaks, you have a sacred work to do. Your work is to remain. Your work is to trust the mother who has set you down, knowing that her eyes never leave you. Let us seal this truth with a prayer. Wherever you are, take a deep breath and let your shoulders drop. Open your hands in your lap, a gesture of emptiness and readiness to receive whatever God wills. Pray this with me. God of the silence, I surrender. I stop fighting the dark. I stop demanding the light. I accept this season of weaning. I thank you that you love me enough to strip away my illusions. I confess that I have loved your gifts more than I have loved you. Forgive me for using you to feel good. Today, I choose to trust you in the void. I choose to believe that you are working in the secret places of my soul. I may not feel your hand, but I trust your heart. Keep me faithful in the night until the morning star rises in my heart. Amen. If this message has found you in your night, know that you are not walking alone. We are a community of seekers, learning to find God in the hidden places. If you want to continue this journey with us, and if you want to be reminded of the truth when the world tries to drown it out, consider subscribing to this channel. We are here to walk with you until the dawn breaks. Peace be with you.
You just uncovered a hidden mystery of God. Subscribe to Hidden God Stories to continue this miraculous journey of faith.